The abandoned infant's wails tore through the silence of the city shelter at midnight, and Olivia Paxton knew she was the only one awake to hear him. She'd been working the graveyard shift at St. Catherine's Crisis Nursery for 3 years, and in all that time, she'd never heard a baby cry quite like this, desperate, inconsolable, as if he sensed already that something was terribly wrong. The note pinned to his basket had been brief and heartbreaking. His father will come for him. Keep him safe until then. His name is Nikolai. Olivia lifted the tiny boy from his wicker basket, cradling his warm weight against her chest. He couldn't have been more than 2 months old, with impossibly pale skin and wisps of white blonde hair that caught the fluorescent lights. His eyes, when they fluttered open, were the strangest shade of silver she'd ever seen. "Shh, little one," she whispered, settling into the worn rocking chair by the window. "I've got you." But Nikolai wouldn't calm. His cries grew more frantic, his tiny fists beating against her shoulder. Olivia had tried everything: fresh bottles, clean diapers, walking, singing, swaddling, but nothing worked. The other staff had given up hours ago, retreating to their break room with sympathetic looks that said she was wasting her time. She wasn't going to give up on him. She never gave up on any of them. It was instinct more than rational thought that made her do it. Olivia had read somewhere that skin-to-skin contact could soothe even the most distressed infants, and she was running out of options. She adjusted her cardigan, unbuttoned her blouse just enough, and brought the baby close to her breast. Nikolai latched immediately, his cries cutting off as if someone had flipped a switch. Olivia gasped softly at the sensation, unexpected, intimate, but also profoundly right. She didn't have milk to give him, of course, but the baby seemed content just to nurse, his little body finally relaxing against hers. His silver eyes drifted closed, one tiny hand curling around her finger with surprising strength. "There you go," Olivia murmured, stroking his downy hair. "That's better, isn't it?" She didn't hear the door open, didn't hear the footsteps that made no sound on the linoleum floor. Didn't sense anything amiss until she felt the temperature in the room drop 10 degrees, and looked up to find a man standing motionless in the doorway, staring at her with an expression of absolute shock. No, not a man. Olivia's breath caught in her throat as she took him in properly. He was impossibly tall, well over 6 feet, with a frame that radiated contained power beneath an immaculately tailored black suit. His skin was porcelain white, so pale it almost seemed to glow in the dim light, and his hair fell past his shoulders in a cascade of pure white silk. His face was all sharp angles and aristocratic beauty, high cheekbones, a strong jaw, lips that looked carved from marble. But it was his eyes that made Olivia's heart stutter with primal recognition of something other, something dangerous. They were crimson, deep, brilliant crimson, like rubies lit from within, and they were fixed on her and the baby with an intensity that made her feel pinned in place. The man, the vampire, her mind supplied helpfully, stood completely still. Not the stillness of a human trying not to move, but the absolute motionless quality of a predator who had just spotted something unexpected, something that had caught him entirely off guard. Olivia's arms instinctively tightened around Nikolai, maternal protectiveness surging through her despite the fact that this child wasn't hers. The baby stirred slightly but didn't wake, apparently unconcerned by the sudden appearance of this otherworldly being. "Who are you?" Olivia managed to ask, proud when her voice came out steady despite the fear thrumming through her veins. "How did you get in here?" The vampire blinked, and the small motion seemed to break whatever spell had held him frozen. He moved then, but not toward her. Instead, he took a careful step backward, one hand rising as if to ward her off or perhaps to reassure her. "I am Lucien Draconis," he said, and his voice was like dark velvet, rich and deep with an accent she couldn't quite place. Old European maybe, but refined over centuries. "I have come for my son." Olivia's eyes widened. She looked down at the peacefully nursing infant, then back up at the vampire lord standing before her.
"You're his father?" "I am."
Lucien's crimson gaze dropped to Nikolai, and something complex flickered across his beautiful, terrible face. Pain, longing, fury. His mother left him here tonight. "I have been searching the city since I discovered them both gone." "The note said you would come," Olivia said slowly. Her mind was racing, trying to reconcile the existence of vampires with the mundane reality of her graveyard shift at a crisis nursery. She said to keep him safe. Lucien's lips twisted bitterly. "Safe from me," she meant. "Though she is a fool if she believes abandoning our son in a human facility provides any true protection." He took another step closer, and Olivia fought the urge to flee. Every instinct screamed that she was in the presence of an apex predator, something that could end her life before she could even cry out. But Nikolai was still nestled against her, still nursing contentedly, and she refused to disturb him just because his father happened to be a vampire. "He wouldn't stop crying," she heard herself say. Nothing worked, but this calmed him. Lucien's eyes fixed on where the baby suckled at her breast, and his expression shifted into something Olivia couldn't read. Awe maybe, or disbelief. When he spoke again, his voice was quieter, almost reverent. "You are nursing my son." "Not really nursing," Olivia corrected quickly, feeling her cheeks flush. "I don't have milk, it's just the contact, the comfort. He needed a mother," Lucien finished softly. "And you gave him one, if only for this moment." They stared at each other across the small nursery room, and Olivia felt the weight of unspoken questions hanging between them. Finally, she asked the one that mattered most. "Are you going to take him? He is my son, my heir." Lucien's voice was firm, but his eyes remained on the baby with an expression that might have been tenderness. "Yes, I will take him. And do what with him? How does a vampire king raise an infant?" The words came out sharper than Olivia intended, fueled by the fierce protectiveness she'd felt since the moment she'd picked up Nikolai's crying form. Lucien's eyes snapped back to her face, and for a moment she thought she'd overstepped, that he might lash out. But instead, something like respect flickered in those crimson depths. "Carefully," he said, "with every resource at my disposal. Nikolai is a Dhampir, half-human, half-vampire. He will need guidance to navigate both worlds as he grows." He paused, then added with devastating honesty, "But you are correct to question my capabilities. I have never raised a child. I have never had cause to, in 800 years. 800 years. Olivia tried to wrap her mind around that and failed. The man before her was older than her country, older than most of the cities on Earth, and he was looking at his infant son with all the uncertainty of any new father. "He needs to eat," Olivia said finally. "Actual food, I mean. Milk. We have formula here," but he wouldn't take the bottle. He just cried and cried until you offered him comfort in the most primal way a woman can. Lucien moved closer, close enough now that Olivia could see the inhuman perfection of his features, the way his skin seemed almost translucent in its paleness. "That is no small thing, Olivia Paxton. You have given my son something I cannot," she startled. "How do you know my name? I can hear your heartbeat, smell your fear and your compassion, read your name from the badge clipped to your pocket." He gestured to the ID card she'd forgotten she was wearing. "I am a predator, Miss Paxton. Observation is instinct." "Right. Of course." Olivia looked down at Nikolai, who had finally fallen into a deep sleep, his rosebud mouth still pressed to her skin. Very carefully she adjusted her blouse and began to ease the baby away. He stirred, whimpering, and immediately Lucien was there beside her chair, his hand hovering near his son's head as if he wanted to touch but wasn't sure he should. "May I?" he asked quietly. Olivia nodded and Lucien gently stroked Nikolai's wispy hair. The baby settled immediately under his father's touch, a soft sigh escaping his tiny lips. The vampire's expression transformed completely, all the regal hardness melting into something vulnerable and awed. "I have fought wars," Lucien whispered, "conquered kingdoms, survived centuries of bloodshed and political intrigue, but holding my son for the first time, knowing his mother tried to hide him from me," his jaw clenched, "I have never felt so powerless." "Why did she leave?" Olivia asked softly. "His mother, I mean fear. Misinformation, perhaps justified caution." Lucien's hand stilled on Nikolai's head. "Elena was human. I made the mistake of loving her, of believing she could accept what I am. We were together for only a brief time before she became pregnant. When she realized the child would be Dhampir, not fully human." He shook his head. "She ran. I have been searching for 3 days. She left the baby here only tonight," Olivia said. "The note was pinned to his basket when I found him. Then she stayed hidden somewhere in the city, trying to care for him alone until she could bear it no longer." Lucien's voice was hollow. "And now she has abandoned him to strangers rather than allow me near my own son." "I'm not going to let anything happen to him," Olivia said fiercely. "That's my job, that's what I do. These babies, the ones nobody else wants or can care for, I protect them. I keep them safe until they can go somewhere better." Lucien turned to look at her fully, and the intensity of his crimson gaze made her breath catch. "You care for human children. Nikolai is not fully human. He's still a baby, that's all that matters." "Is it?" Lucien straightened to his full imposing height. "You should know what he is, what he will become. Dhampirs are rare, Miss Paxton. They inherit strength, speed, and longevity from their vampire parent, but they can also walk in sunlight and consume human food. As Nikolai grows, he will develop abilities that will frighten you. He will need blood, though not as frequently as a full vampire. He will be stronger than any human child, and he will live for centuries, watching everyone he loves age and die. Right now, he's a 2-month-old baby who needs to be fed and changed and held," Olivia said stubbornly. "We can worry about the rest later." Something like approval gleamed in Lucien's eyes. "You are either remarkably brave or remarkably foolish, maybe both." Olivia stood carefully, cradling Nikolai against her shoulder. The baby stirred but remained asleep, his tiny body warm and trusting in her arms. Look, I don't know anything about vampires or dampiers or any of this, but I know children. And I know that this little one has been through something traumatic tonight. He needs stability, routine, gentle care. All things I can provide, can you? Really? Olivia met his gaze squarely. You said you've never raised a child. Do you even know how to prepare a bottle? Change a diaper? Recognize the difference between a hungry cry and a tired cry? Lucien's expression suggested he did not, in fact, know any of those things. I have servants, he said after a moment. An entire estate. Resources. Servants aren't parents. You can't just hand him off to staff and call it done. Olivia knew she was pushing her luck, challenging a vampire king, but she couldn't stop herself. Nikolai had been placed in her care, and she took that responsibility seriously. He's already lost his mother. He needs his father to actually be present, not just provide for him. You dare lecture me on parenting? Lucien's voice dropped dangerously low, and Olivia felt the temperature in the room plummet. You who have no children of your own. I dare because somebody has to. Olivia's hands trembled slightly, but she held her ground. You can kill me if you want. I'm sure it would be easy for you, but it won't change the fact that Nikolai needs more than money and servants. He needs love, attention, consistency. For a long moment, Lucien simply stared at her, and Olivia was certain she'd gone too far. Then, unexpectedly, the vampire smiled a small, rueful expression that transformed his severe features into something almost approachable. You are brave, he said quietly. Foolishly brave, and you are correct. I do not know how to care for an infant. I do not know what my son needs beyond safety and sustenance. He paused, and when he spoke again, there was something almost like hope in his voice. But you do. Olivia's eyes widened as she realized where this was going. No, you can't possibly come with us, Lucien said. Be Nikolai's nurse, his nanny. Whatever title you prefer, I will pay you handsomely, provide you with quarters in my estate, ensure your safety and comfort. In return, you will teach me how to be the father my son needs. That's insane. I have a life here, a job, an apartment. Do you have family? A lover? Anyone who would miss you? Olivia's silence was answer enough. The truth was she'd been alone for years now. Her parents had died in a car accident when she was 20, and she'd thrown herself into her work as a way to cope with the grief. St. Catherine's had become her whole world, these abandoned children her purpose. But she didn't have friends who would notice if she disappeared, didn't have a boyfriend wondering why she hadn't called. I can't just leave, she said weakly. You can, you are choosing not to. Lucien moved closer, and Olivia caught his scent, something dark and spicy like incense and winter nights. I am offering you a position of great importance, Miss Paxton. My son needs you. He has already bonded with you in a way he has with no one else. Would you truly abandon him because you fear what I am? I don't fear you, Olivia lied. Lucien's lips quirked. Your heartbeat suggests otherwise. But fear is not a weakness. Fear is wisdom. What matters is whether you will act despite it. Olivia looked down at Nikolai, sleeping so peacefully in her arms. She thought about the dozens of children she'd cared for over the years, the babies she'd rocked and fed and loved before watching them move on to foster families or adoptive homes. She'd never been able to follow them, to see how their stories ended. Never been more than a brief stop in their journey. But this baby, this impossible half-vampire child, needed her in a way none of the others had. And his father, ancient and powerful and clearly struggling, was offering her a chance to actually make a lasting difference. How do I know you won't hurt me? She asked quietly. Once you have what you want, once you've learned how to care for Nikolai, how do I know you won't just dispose of me? Lucien was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of centuries. I am vampire, Miss Paxton. We are bound by ancient laws, codes of honor that predate your written language. If I give you my word that you will come to no harm under my protection, it is an unbreakable vow. To violate it would mean losing my standing among my kind, possibly my throne. Your throne? I am king of the Northern Vampire Court, Lucien said simply. One of 5 courts that govern vampire society across the world. My word is law among my people, and my honor is everything. I give you my word now. No harm will come to you while you are in my service. You will be paid generously for your work. And when you wish to leave, if you wish to leave, you will be free to go with enough wealth to live comfortably for the rest of your mortal life. It should have sounded too good to be true. Probably was too good to be true. But Olivia found herself believing him anyway, found herself trusting those strange crimson eyes. 1 month, she heard herself say. I'll come for 1 month. Long enough to help you establish a routine with Nikolai to make sure he's settling in properly. After that, we reassess. Acceptable. Lucien inclined his head in a gesture that was almost a bow. Gather what you need from your home. We will leave before dawn. Wait, you mean right now? I have been away from my court for 3 days searching for my son. Every hour I remain absent is an hour my enemies might exploit. Lucien's expression hardened. And Elena is still out there somewhere. If she told anyone else about Nikolai, if word spreads that a Dhampir heir has been born to the northern king, there are those who would seek to harm him, to use him as leverage against me. The fear in his voice was real, and it sent a chill down Olivia's spine. She'd been so focused on Nikolai's immediate needs that she hadn't thought about the broader implications. This baby wasn't just a child, he was a prince, an heir to a vampire kingdom, and apparently a potential target. Okay, she said, decision crystallizing. Okay, I need to tell my supervisor I'm leaving and no. Lucien's voice was firm. The fewer people who know of this, the better. I will ensure your employer receives notice of your sudden resignation and a generous donation to compensate for the inconvenience. But we cannot risk anyone connecting you to me or to Nikolai. You want me to just disappear? I want you to be safe. Both of you, Lucien gestured to the sleeping baby. Please, Miss Paxton, trust me in this. Olivia swallowed hard, then nodded. She was doing this. She was actually doing this. Leaving her entire life behind to work for a vampire king and care for his Dhampir son. I need to at least grab some things from my apartment, she said. Clothes, toiletries, where do you live? About 20 minutes from here. The apartment's on 7th Street. Lucien pulled out a sleek black phone and sent a rapid text. My people will collect your belongings and bring them to the estate. Tell me what you need, and it will be retrieved. You can't just break into my apartment. I assure you, they will not break anything. Lucien's tone was dry. They are quite skilled at discreet retrieval. Olivia wanted to argue further, but Nikolai was starting to stir against her shoulder, making little mewling sounds that suggested he'd be awake and crying again soon. She needed to focus on him, not on the surreal circumstances of her own life. Fine, she said. But if they forget my favorite coffee mug, I'm blaming you. Something that might have been amusement flickered across Lucien's face. Duly noted. The vampire lord produced a key from his pocket and gestured toward the door. My car is waiting outside. We should go now, while the night still offers us cover. Olivia grabbed Nikolai's diaper bag with her free hand, checked to make sure he was properly wrapped in his blanket, and followed Lucien out of the nursery. The building was silent, all the other staff apparently still on their break. She felt a pang of guilt for leaving without explanation. But Lucien was right, the less anyone knew, the safer everyone would be. The car was a sleek black sedan with tinted windows so dark they looked like they'd been dipped in ink. A tall woman with the same porcelain skin and white hair as Lucien stood beside the passenger door, dressed in what looked like tactical gear. Her eyes were a startling violet and they assessed Olivia with cold efficiency. This is the human? She asked Lucien in a voice like frozen bells. This is Miss Olivia Paxton who will be caring for my son, Lucien corrected, his tone carrying a warning. She is under my protection, Seraphine. Ensure the others understand this. Seraphine's expression remained neutral, but she inclined her head. As you command, my lord. Lucien opened the back door and gestured for Olivia to enter. She slid into the leather interior, cradling Nikolai carefully, and was startled when Lucien joined her in the back rather than sitting up front. The vampire settled beside her, close enough that she could feel the unnatural coldness emanating from his body. And Seraphine took the driver's seat. How long to the estate? Lucien asked. 40 minutes, my lord. Traffic is minimal. Good, take the scenic route. I want to ensure we are not followed. As the car pulled smoothly into the empty midnight streets, Olivia found herself hyper-aware of the vampire sitting beside her. Lucien's attention was fixed on Nikolai, his crimson eyes soft as he watched his son sleep. Very slowly, hesitantly, he reached out and touched the baby's tiny hand. Nikolai's fingers curled reflexively around his father's pale finger, and Lucien's breath caught an unnecessary gesture for a vampire. Olivia suspected but a deeply human response to his child's touch. He is so small, Lucien murmured. So fragile. All babies are fragile, Olivia said gently. But they're also tougher than they look, resilient. I could destroy him with a thought. A moment's loss of control. Lucien's voice was hollow. How am I supposed to protect him when I am the greatest danger to him? You won't hurt him, Olivia said with surprising certainty. I can see it in your eyes. You love him. Love. Lucien said the word like it was foreign. I am not certain I know what that means anymore. I have existed for so long, felt so little, but you feel something for him. You search for 3 days straight. You're bringing him home. You're trying. Olivia shifted Nikolai slightly so Lucien could see his son's peaceful face more clearly. That's what matters. The trying. They rode in silence for a while, the city lights giving way to darker roads lined with trees. Olivia found her eyelids growing heavy despite the strangeness of her situation. The adrenaline of the encounter was wearing off, leaving exhaustion in its wake. "Sleep if you wish," Lucien said quietly. "I will watch over you both. I barely know you. How can I just fall asleep next to you? Because your instincts recognize that I mean you no harm, because you are exhausted, and because on some level you trust me." Lucien's eyes met hers in the dim interior of the car. "I will not betray that trust, Olivia Paxton." The use of her first name sent an unexpected flutter through her chest. Olivia told herself it was just nerves, just the surreal nature of everything happening. But as she let her head rest against the leather seat and her eyes drift closed, she couldn't deny the strange sense of safety she felt in the vampire's presence. She woke to Lucien's hand on her shoulder and the car rolling to a stop. Blinking groggily, Olivia looked out the window and felt her jaw drop. They weren't at a mansion or an estate. They were in an underground parking garage, but not one she'd ever seen before. The walls were polished black stone, lit by torches that burned with an eerie blue-white flame. Other vehicles were parked in neat rows, all of them expensive, all of them black. "Where are we?" Olivia asked, clutching Nikolai closer. "Beneath the city," Lucien said as he exited the car and came around to help her out. "The northern court maintains an extensive network of tunnels and chambers below the urban sprawl. Safer than trying to maintain a surface dwelling, and it allows us to move about even during daylight hours without risk. You live underground? We have done so for centuries. Long before this city existed, there were caverns here. We simply expanded them, reinforced them, made them into something befitting a royal court." Lucien placed a hand on the small of her back, guiding her toward a pair of massive doors carved from dark wood. "You will find it quite comfortable, I assure you." The doors swung open at their approach, revealing a corridor that took Olivia's breath away. The walls were smooth stone, but inlaid with veins of silver and crystal that caught the torchlight and made the entire space shimmer. The floor was polished marble, and tapestries depicting ancient battles hung at regular intervals. "This is incredible," Olivia whispered. "This is merely the entrance." Lucien sounded almost amused. "Wait until you see the rest." They walked through winding corridors, passing other vampires who stopped and stared at Olivia with undisguised curiosity. All of them had the same alabaster skin and white hair, though their eyes varied in color: crimson, violet, gold, silver. All of them were beautiful in that same unsettling, otherworldly way, and all of them bowed deeply when Lucien passed. Finally, they reached another set of doors, these ones even more ornate than the first. Lucien pushed them open to reveal what could only be described as a palace chamber. The ceiling soared at least 30 feet high, supported by carved pillars. A massive fireplace dominated one wall, filled with those same blue-white flames. Furniture that looked like it belonged in a museum was arranged throughout the space: velvet couches, antique tables, hand-woven rugs. "These will be your quarters," Lucien said. "The bedchamber is through that door, and the bathing room beyond. Nikolai's nursery connects to your room. I had it prepared when Elena first told me she was pregnant, though she never saw it." Olivia walked through the space in a daze, trying to process that this was going to be her home. The bedroom was twice the size of her entire apartment, with a 4-poster bed draped in silk and a wardrobe that looked like it could hold 100 outfits. The bathroom had a tub the size of a small pool and fixtures that gleamed like gold. The nursery, though, was what made her throat tighten. It was perfect. A beautiful wooden crib sat in the center, surrounded by shelves of toys and books. A changing table was stocked with diapers and supplies. A rocking chair identical to the one at St. Catherine's sat by a window, though this window showed only more underground chambers, lit by those strange torches. "I wanted him to have everything," Lucien said quietly from the doorway. "Even if Elena chose never to bring him here." "It's beautiful," Olivia said honestly. "He's going to love it." Nikolai chose that moment to wake fully, his silver eyes blinking open as he looked around the unfamiliar space. For a moment, Olivia braced for crying, but the baby simply gazed up at her with what looked like curiosity. "Hey there, little one," she murmured. "Welcome home." "He needs to eat," Lucien said. "I had the kitchen prepare formula according to human infant standards. But I am uncertain. Show me the kitchen and I'll handle it," Olivia said. "Have you been around babies at all?" "I have not, as I said, in 800 years. "Right. Okay. Crash course in infant care, starting now." Olivia gently placed Nikolai in his crib, making sure he was secure, then turned to face Lucien. "First rule, babies eat every 2 to 3 hours, sometimes more frequently. Nikolai is about 2 months old, so he'll probably want 4 to 6 ounces per feeding." Lucien listened intently as Olivia walked him through the basics: how to prepare a bottle, how to test the temperature, how to burp a baby after feeding. They made their way to the kitchen, which was a stunning blend of modern appliances and old-world architecture. And Olivia prepared a bottle while explaining each step. Back in the nursery, she demonstrated how to hold Nikolai at the correct angle, how to watch for signs that he was done eating, how to burp him gently on the shoulder. Lucien watched everything with absolute focus, asking questions that showed he was genuinely trying to learn. "Would you like to try?" Olivia asked, offering him the bottle. Lucien hesitated, and for the first time since she'd met him, the vampire king looked uncertain. "What if I harm him?" "You won't. Look, you're already touching him, right? And you haven't hurt him. You know your own strength." Olivia guided Lucien to sit in the rocking chair, then carefully transferred Nikolai into his arms. "Support his head like this. Keep the bottle angled so he doesn't swallow air. There you go." Lucien held his son like he was cradling a priceless artifact, his entire body rigid with concentration. But as Nikolai began to drink from the bottle, making contented little sounds, something in the vampire's expression softened. Wonder replaced fear, and the hand supporting Nikolai's head relaxed into something almost tender. "He is extraordinary," Lucien whispered. "He is," Olivia agreed, her chest tight with emotion at the sight of this ancient, powerful being discovering fatherhood. They spent the next hour establishing a routine feeding, burping, a diaper change that Lucien handled with surprising competence once shown how. By the time Nikolai was clean, fed, and drowsy again, dawn was approaching. "I must retire to my chambers," Lucien said reluctantly. "The sun will rise soon, and while we are safe underground, the pull to sleep during daylight hours is intense. Seraphine will remain nearby if you need anything. There is a bell pull in each room, use it, and someone will come immediately." "We'll be fine," Olivia assured him, even though the thought of being alone in this underground palace was terrifying. "Go, rest. Nikolai will probably sleep for a few hours anyway." Lucien stood, then paused at the doorway. "Thank you, Olivia, for everything. For caring for my son when he had no one, for agreeing to come here, he seemed to struggle for words, for not running in fear." "I'm terrified," Olivia admitted, "but that doesn't mean I'm going to run." Something that might have been respect gleamed in Lucien's crimson eyes. Then he was gone, moving with that inhuman speed, and Olivia was alone with the baby. She settled Nikolai into his crib and stood watching him sleep for a long moment. What had she gotten herself into? This morning she'd been a normal woman with a normal job, and now she was the nanny to a vampire prince living in an underground palace, working for a king who was 800 years old. It was insane. Absolutely insane, but as Nikolai made a soft, contented sound in his sleep, Olivia found she didn't regret her choice. This baby needed her. And maybe, just maybe, his father did too. The next few weeks fell into an unexpected rhythm. Olivia's days, or rather nights, were consumed with caring for Nikolai. The baby thrived under her attention, growing more alert and responsive by the day. His silver eyes would track her movements around the nursery, and he'd begun making cooing sounds that melted her heart. Lucien was a constant presence, appearing each evening as soon as the sun set to spend time with his son. Olivia taught him everything: how to bathe Nikolai in the small tub, how to recognize different types of cries, how to play with him in ways that encouraged development. The vampire learned quickly, his preternatural memory retaining every detail she shared, but it was more than just learning childcare. Olivia watched as Lucien transformed from a wary, uncertain father into someone genuinely devoted. He would spend hours simply holding Nikolai, talking to him in that low, melodic voice about vampire history and court politics, and all the things he wanted to teach his son someday. He was gentle beyond measure, always conscious of his supernatural strength, always careful, and Olivia found herself falling a little bit in love with both of them. It was dangerous, she knew. Lucien was a vampire, an immortal being who could never truly be part of her world. Nikolai would outlive her by centuries. There was no future in getting attached, but she couldn't help herself. The baby had captured her heart from the first moment, and his father, Lucien, was nothing like what she'd expected. Yes, he was commanding and powerful, with an authority that made even the oldest vampires in his court bow deeply. But he was also thoughtful, often asking Olivia's opinion on matters both large and small. He was curious about her life, her past, her thoughts on everything from philosophy to what she'd had for dinner. And he was protective in a way that made her feel treasured rather than controlled. It was during the third week that everything changed. Olivia was in the nursery, humming softly as she rocked Nikolai to sleep, when she heard raised voices coming from somewhere in the palace. She'd learned that vampires had excellent hearing, so they usually spoke quietly to avoid eavesdropping. Raised voices meant something was seriously wrong. The nursery door burst open and Seraphine stood there, her violet eyes blazing with urgency. "Miss Paxton, you must come with me immediately. Bring the child." "What's happening?" Olivia clutched Nikolai closer, the baby waking at the sudden commotion. "The southern court has sent an envoy. They are demanding to see the Dhampir heir." Seraphine's expression was grim. "The king has requested your presence in the throne room." Olivia's heart hammered as she followed Seraphine through the winding corridors. She'd never been to the throne room before, had deliberately avoided the more public areas of the palace. But now she was being led into the heart of vampire politics, and she had no idea what to expect. The throne room was even more impressive than her quarters. The ceiling was lost in shadows, and the walls were lined with more vampires than Olivia had ever seen in one place. All of them turned to stare as she entered. Holding Nikolai against her chest, Lucien sat on a throne carved from black stone, dressed in formal robes that made him look every inch the king he was. His crimson eyes found her immediately, and something in his expression softened before hardening again. As he looked at the group of vampires standing before him, they were different from Lucien's court. Their skin was the same porcelain white, but their hair ranged from silver to black, and their eyes glowed with colors Olivia had never seen: amber, emerald, sapphire. The one in front, clearly the leader, had hair like spun platinum and eyes that burned gold. "So this is the human you've taken as a nursemaid," the golden-eyed vampire said, his voice dripping with disdain. "How quaint! You will address Miss Paxton with respect, Matthias," Lucien said, his voice cold enough to frost the air. "She is under my protection and in my employ. Your quarrel is with me, not her. My quarrel is with the abomination you are attempting to legitimize as your heir." Matthias gestured at Nikolai with a sneer. "A Dhampir cannot rule a vampire court. It is against every law, every tradition." "Those laws were written when Dhampirs were rare and poorly understood," Lucien countered. "My son carries my blood, my power. He is the rightful heir to the northern throne. He is half human, weak, mortal." Matthias's golden eyes fixed on Olivia, and she felt the weight of his contempt like a physical force. "You would pollute our bloodlines for the sake of a dalliance with this creature? That creature nursed my son when he was abandoned and crying," Lucien said, rising from his throne. The temperature in the room dropped 20 degrees, and Olivia could see her breath misting in the air. "She showed him more compassion in one night than you have shown anyone in 500 years, Matthias. Watch your tongue, or I will remove it." Matthias's lips pulled back, revealing fangs that gleamed in the torchlight. "You threaten me? The Southern Court will not tolerate." "The Southern Court will tolerate whatever I decree within my own domain," Lucien interrupted, his voice like thunder. "Unless you wish to contest my authority directly." The challenge hung in the air. Olivia held Nikolai tighter, praying the baby wouldn't start crying and draw more attention. She could feel the tension in the room, could sense how close these ancient beings were to violence. Finally, Matthias stepped back, inclining his head in a gesture that was barely respectful. "The Southern Court acknowledges your right to rule your territory as you see fit, but we will not acknowledge the Dhampir as legitimate heir. When the time comes for him to claim your throne, we will oppose it. Then we will deal with that opposition when it arises," Lucien said coldly. "For now you have seen my son, you have delivered your message, you are dismissed." Matthias and his entourage swept from the room, their movements liquid and predatory. The moment they were gone, the other vampires in the throne room began to whisper among themselves. Olivia caught fragments of conversation: concerns about war, questions about Nikolai's legitimacy, speculation about Lucien's attachment to his human nursemaid. Lucien descended from his throne and crossed to her in 3 long strides. "Are you hurt? Did he touch you?" "I'm fine," Olivia assured him, though her hands were shaking. "Nikolai's fine, we're both fine. You should not have been subjected to that." Lucien's jaw was tight with anger. "I thought they would merely demand to see Nikolai. I did not expect Matthias to insult you directly." "It's okay, I've been called worse." Olivia tried for a smile, but it came out shaky. "Is it true, though, about Dhampirs not being able to rule? There is no law that explicitly forbids it, but there is precedent against it. Dhampirs are rare, as I said, and most vampire courts view them with suspicion. They are seen as neither one thing nor the other, not vampire enough to be trusted, not human enough to be dismissed." Lucien's hand came up to rest on Nikolai's head, his expression fierce. "But my son will be different. I will ensure he has the strength, the knowledge, and the support to rule when the time comes, even if it means war, even if it means war." Lucien's crimson eyes met hers, blazing with determination. "I will not abandon him to prejudice and fear. He is my heir, and I will die before I let anyone harm him." The intensity of his declaration sent a shiver through Olivia. She believed him completely. Lucien would burn the world down for his son. "Come," he said, his voice gentling. "Let us return to the nursery. Nikolai should not be exposed to court politics yet. He has time to grow before he must face these challenges." As they walked back through the corridors, Olivia couldn't shake the feeling that time was something they didn't have as much of as Lucien believed. The Southern Court had made their position clear. Other courts would likely follow. Nikolai was going to grow up with a target on his back simply because of what he was. "You are troubled," Lucien observed as they entered this nursery. "Tell me your thoughts." "I'm worried," Olivia admitted, settling into the rocking chair with Nikolai. "Not just about the Southern Court, but about all of it. Nikolai is going to face so much prejudice, so much opposition. How is he supposed to handle that? He's just a baby. He will not always be a baby, and he will not face these challenges alone." Lucien knelt beside the rocking chair, bringing himself to eye level with her. "He will have me. He will have loyal members of this court. And if you are willing, he will have you. I told you I'd stay for a month. It's almost been that long. I know, and I am asking you to stay longer." Lucien's hand covered hers where it rested on the chair's arm. His touch was cool but not unpleasant. "Nikolai needs you, Olivia. He thrives under your care in ways I cannot provide. And I—" He paused, seeming to struggle with the words. "I find that I do not wish for you to leave." Olivia's breath caught. "Lucien, I know what I am asking is unfair. Your life is on the surface in the sunlight among your own kind. What I offer is darkness and danger and a child who will never be fully accepted by either world." His crimson eyes searched hers. "But I am asking anyway, stay. Not as a temporary employee, but as part of our family. Help me raise my son, help him understand both sides of his nature. And what about us?" The question slipped out before Olivia could stop it. "What are we to each other?" Lucien was quiet for a long moment, his gaze dropping to where Nikolai dozed contentedly in her arms. "I do not know," he said finally. "I have not felt anything for another being in centuries. My relationship with Elena was brief, passionate, but ultimately shallow. She wanted the thrill of being with a vampire, not the reality of it. But you—" He looked up at her again, and Olivia's heart stuttered at the vulnerability in his expression. "You see me, not just the king, not just the monster. You see the parts of me that I thought were long dead." "You're not a monster," Olivia said softly. "You're a father trying to do right by his son. You're a king trying to protect his people. You're someone who's lived long enough to be tired but still cares enough to fight. I am also a predator who drinks blood to survive. An immortal who will watch you age and die if you stay. I know what you are, Lucien. I'm not afraid anymore. Perhaps you should be. Perhaps I should send you away for your own good." But even as he said it, Lucien's hand tightened on hers. "But I find I am too selfish. I want you to stay. Not just for Nikolai's sake, but for my own." Olivia's heart was racing now, and she knew Lucien could hear it, could probably smell the change in her scent, could read every nervous, excited, terrified thought crossing her mind. She should say no, should walk away from this impossible situation before she got in any deeper. But when she looked down at Nikolai, sleeping so trustingly in her arms, and then back up at Lucien, kneeling before her with centuries of loneliness in his eyes, she knew she'd already made her choice. "I'll stay," she whispered, "for as long as you'll have me." The relief that washed over Lucien's face was profound. He rose, leaned down, and pressed a kiss to her forehead, a gesture so tender it brought tears to Olivia's eyes. "Thank you," he murmured against her skin. "You have no idea what this means to me, to us." As Lucien straightened and moved to check on his sleeping son, Olivia felt the weight of her decision settle over her. She'd just committed to a life in the darkness, to raising a child who would outlive her by centuries, to staying by the side of a vampire king who might never be able to love her the way a human man could. But she'd also committed to something beautiful and rare, a family forged not by blood alone but by choice, by compassion, by the quiet moments of rocking a baby to sleep and teaching an ancient being how to be a father. It wasn't the life she'd planned, but it was the life she wanted. The months that followed were both challenging and wonderful. Olivia settled fully into her role, not just as Nikolai's caretaker but as an integral part of Lucien's court. The other vampires gradually accepted her presence. Though some remained wary of the human who had so much influence over their king, Nikolai grew rapidly, developing at a pace that was faster than a human infant but slower than a full vampire. By 6 months he was already pulling himself up on furniture and babbling in a mix of sounds that sometimes seemed to echo the melodic quality of the vampire language. His silver eyes were bright and intelligent, tracking everything around him with keen interest. And Lucien was a devoted father. He spent every possible moment with his son, teaching him, playing with him, simply existing in his presence. Olivia watched as the vampire lord transformed, as the harsh edges of his personality softened into something warmer when he was with Nikolai. But it was the moments between Lucien and Olivia that made her breath catch. Stolen glances across the nursery, hands brushing as they both reached for Nikolai. Late-night conversations after the baby was asleep, where they would talk about everything and nothing, learning each other's histories and hopes and fears. Lucien never pushed for more than she was ready to give, but the tension between them built with each passing day. Olivia found herself hyper-aware of his presence, of the way his eyes would darken when he looked at her, of the careful distance he maintained as if afraid he might break her. It was Nikolai's first birthday that changed everything. The Northern Court had prepared a celebration, a formal affair with vampires from allied courts in attendance. Olivia had been nervous about the event, knowing she would be scrutinized as the human who had become so important to the heir. But Lucien had been adamant that she attend, that she stand beside him as they presented their son to vampire society. The throne room had been transformed, decorated with tapestries and flowers that bloomed only in darkness. Olivia wore a gown that Lucien had commissioned for her, deep emerald silk that brought out her eyes and made her feel like she belonged in this gothic, beautiful world. Nikolai was dressed in miniature formal wear, looking like a tiny prince as he babbled happily in Olivia's arms. He'd grown so much in the past year, developing a personality that was equal parts mischievous and sweet. He had his father's determination and what Olivia liked to think was her compassion. The celebration went smoothly at first. Various court members came to pay their respects, offering gifts and words of congratulation. Nikolai charmed them all, reaching for their pale hair with chubby fingers and laughing when they made him smile. But then Elena arrived. Olivia didn't recognize her at first, just saw a beautiful woman with dark hair and human features standing at the edge of the crowd. But the way Lucien tensed beside her, the way his hand moved protectively to Nikolai's back, told her everything she needed to know. "Elena," Lucien said, his voice carefully neutral. "I did not expect you to attend." "He's my son too," Elena said, and her voice was thick with pain. "I know I don't have the right to be here, but I wanted to see him. Just once. To know he's okay." Olivia's arms tightened instinctively around Nikolai. She'd spent a year caring for this baby, loving him, watching him grow. And here was the woman who had given birth to him, who had abandoned him out of fear. "He is well cared for," Lucien said coldly. "As you can see." Elena's eyes found Olivia, and the pain in them was devastating. "You're the one from the nursery. The one who was nursing him when Lucien found him." "Yes," Olivia said quietly. "I'm Olivia. Thank you." Elena's voice broke. "Thank you for taking care of him when I couldn't, when I was too afraid to." "You left him alone and crying in a crisis nursery," Olivia said, and she couldn't keep the anger from her voice. "He needed you and you abandoned him." I know, and I'll regret it for the rest of my life." Tears streamed down Elena's face. "But I was terrified. Lucien is a vampire king and our son is Dampier, and I didn't know how to navigate that world. I thought he'd be safer with humans, that maybe someone could adopt him and he could have a normal life." "He could never have a normal life," Lucien said, and there was no sympathy in his voice. "He is what he is. Running from it, hiding from it, would not change his nature. You should have trusted me to protect him. To protect you both." "I'm sorry," Elena whispered. "I'm so sorry." Nikolai, who had been watching this exchange with solemn silver eyes, suddenly reached out toward Elena. His little hand opened and closed, a gesture Olivia recognized as him wanting to be held. Elena gasped, fresh tears falling. May I hold him just for a moment?" Olivia looked at Lucien, uncertain. The vampire's expression was hard, unforgiving, but after a long moment he nodded. "One moment," he said, "and only because it is his birthday, and I will not deny him the chance to know his mother." Olivia carefully transferred Nikolai into Elena's arms, watching closely to make sure the woman would support him properly. Elena cradled her son like he was made of glass, sobbing openly as she looked down at his face. "You're so beautiful," she whispered. "So perfect. I'm sorry I wasn't strong enough to stay. I'm sorry I left you." Nikolai touched her face with one small hand and Elena broke down completely. She held him for less than a minute before carefully, reluctantly handing him back to Olivia. "Take care of him," Elena said, looking directly at Olivia. "Love him the way I should have been brave enough to do." "I will," Olivia promised. "I already do." Elena nodded, then turned to Lucien. "I'm not asking to be part of his life. I know I gave up that right. But if there's ever anything he needs, anything at all, please let me know. I'll help however I can." "You can help by leaving," Lucien said, though his voice had lost some of its edge. "And by never abandoning another child the way you abandoned ours." Elena flinched but nodded. She took one look at Nikolai, memorizing his face, then turned and walked out of the throne room. The celebration continued, but Olivia's mind was elsewhere. She couldn't stop thinking about Elena's pain, about the fear that had driven her to leave her own child. It reminded her how precarious her own situation was, how she was a human in a vampire world, raising a child who would never fully belong to either. Later that night, after Nikolai had been put to bed and the last of the guests had departed, Olivia found herself standing on one of the palace's many balconies. It overlooked the underground city that surrounded the court, lit by those strange blue-white torches that never seemed to dim. "You are troubled again," Lucien said, appearing beside her with that supernatural silence. "I can't stop thinking about Elena," Olivia admitted, "about how afraid she was. How much it must have cost her to give Nikolai up. She made her choice. I will not forgive her for it. I'm not asking you to forgive her. Olivia turned to face him. "I understand her fear, Lucien. I'm human too. I don't have your strength or your power or your centuries of experience. What if I make the wrong choice? What if I fail Nikolai the way she did? You could never fail him. You have already given him more love and stability than most children receive in a lifetime." Lucien moved closer, his hand coming up to cup her cheek. "You are not Elena, Olivia. You are stronger than you know." "I'm not strong. I'm just stubborn." A smile tugged at Lucien's lips. "Perhaps that is the same thing." They stood like that for a moment, his hand on her face, her heart racing. The air between them felt charged, heavy with all the things they'd been dancing around for months. "Olivia," Lucien said softly, "I need to tell you something. Something I have been too cowardly to say." "You're never cowardly." "I am when it comes to this, when it comes to you." His thumb stroked across her cheekbone, a gesture so tender it made her throat tight. "I am falling in love with you. Perhaps I have been since the moment I saw you nursing my son, showing him compassion when you had no reason to. I know it is selfish. I know I can offer you nothing but darkness and danger, but I cannot keep silent any longer." Olivia's breath caught. She'd hoped, had wondered, but hearing him say it made it real, made it terrifying and exhilarating all at once. "Lucien, you do not need to respond. I do not expect you to feel the same. You are human, vibrant, full of life. You deserve someone who can give you sunlight and a normal existence. But I wanted you to know. I wanted you to understand why I am so desperate for you to stay." "You're an idiot," Olivia said, and laughed at his startled expression. "I'm already in love with you. I have been for months. I just didn't think. I didn't know if you could feel that way about me." "How could I not?" Lucien's voice was rough with emotion. "You are everything I am not. Warm where I am cold, gentle where I am harsh, human where I am monster. You make me remember what it is to feel, to hope, to dream of a future beyond mere survival." "You're not a monster," Olivia said fiercely. "You're a good man, a good father. And yes, you're a vampire, and yes, that complicates things, but I don't care. I love you, all of you." Lucien's crimson eyes blazed with an intensity that made her shiver. Then he was kissing her, his cool lips moving against hers with a desperation that spoke of centuries of loneliness. Olivia melted into him, her hands fisting in his shirt as she kissed him back with equal fervor. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, though Lucien didn't need to breathe, Olivia couldn't stop smiling. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now." Lucien's smile was radiant, transforming his severe features into something almost boyish. "Now we figure it out together, you, me, and Nikolai. A family, a very unusual family, the best kind." Lucien pulled her close again, resting his forehead against hers. "I cannot promise you an easy life, Olivia. There will be those who oppose our relationship, who view you as a weakness or a distraction. The Southern Court and others will continue to challenge Nikolai's legitimacy. We will face dangers and difficulties I cannot yet foresee. I know, and I'm still staying. Then I will spend every day of your mortal life ensuring you never regret that choice. I will protect you with everything I am. I will love you with a devotion that outlasts empires." His voice dropped to a whisper. "And when your time comes, when age claims you as it must claim all humans, I will mourn you until the stars go dark." Tears pricked Olivia's eyes. "That's depressing. It is honest. I will not lie to you about what this means. You will age while I remain unchanged. You will grow old while Nikolai stays young. It will be hard, then we'll face it when it comes. Together." Olivia kissed him again, slower this time, savoring the feel of him. "For now, let's just enjoy what we have. Let's raise Nikolai and build our family and deal with whatever comes one day at a time." "One day at a time," Lucien agreed. "I can do that." They stood together on the balcony, wrapped in each other's arms, and for the first time in months, Olivia felt completely at peace. This was her life now, her family, her future. It was strange and complicated and sometimes terrifying, but it was hers, and she wouldn't trade it for anything. The next few years brought challenges exactly as Lucien had predicted. The Southern Court made several attempts to undermine Nikolai's position, spreading rumors and sowing discord among the vampire courts. Other factions emerged, some supporting the Dhampir heir and others vehemently opposed. But through it all, Lucien, Olivia, and Nikolai remained united. Nikolai grew into a remarkable child, displaying abilities that amazed even the oldest vampires. He could move with supernatural speed and strength when he wanted to, but he could also run and play in sunlight, which no full vampire could do. He was brilliant, learning multiple languages by age 3 and showing an aptitude for both human sciences and vampire magic. and he was kind in a way that reminded Olivia why she'd fallen in love with his father. Nikolai had inherited Lucien's intensity and determination, but tempered it with a compassion that was all his own. He cared deeply about others, both human and vampire, and he seemed to instinctively understand how to bridge the gap between the two worlds. Lucien proved to be every bit the devoted partner he'd promised. He courted Olivia with a patience and romance that made her feel cherished every single day. Flowers that bloomed only in darkness appeared in her chambers. Antique books on subjects she'd mentioned in passing materialized in her library. He commissioned artists to paint her portrait, sculptors to capture Nikolai's likeness, musicians to compose pieces in her honor. But more than the grand gestures, it was the small moments that meant the most. The way Lucien would read bedtime stories to Nikolai with different voices for each character. The way he would pull Olivia into his arms when she was stressed and simply hold her until she felt better. The way he looked at both of them like they were his entire world. 3 years after Nikolai's first birthday, Lucien asked Olivia to marry him. They were in the garden's underground caverns that had been cultivated into breathtaking spaces filled with plants that thrived without sunlight. Nikolai was playing nearby, building elaborate structures with blocks while chattering to himself in a mix of English and the vampire tongue. "Olivia," Lucien said, and something in his tone made her turn to face him fully. He was kneeling before her, a small velvet box in his pale hand. When he opened it, she gasped. The ring inside was stunning, a large ruby surrounded by diamonds, set in silver that had been carved with intricate patterns. "I know that marriage between vampire and human is unusual," Lucien said. "I know that our union will be questioned and criticized, but I do not care about any of that. You are my heart, Olivia Paxton. You have given me a family, a purpose beyond mere rule. You have taught me how to love again. Will you do me the extraordinary honor of becoming my wife?" "Yes," Olivia said without hesitation. "Yes, absolutely yes." Lucien slipped the ring onto her finger, then rose and kissed her deeply. Nikolai, noticing the embrace, toddled over and demanded to be included, wrapping his small arms around both their legs. They were married a month later in a ceremony that blended vampire and human traditions. Olivia wore a gown of white silk threaded with silver, and Lucien wore formal robes that made him look like the ancient king he was. Nikolai served as ring-bearer, taking his job with adorable seriousness. Not everyone approved. There were vampires who boycotted the ceremony, who spoke openly about how the king was weakening himself by binding his life to a mortal. The southern court sent a formal letter of disapproval, but there were also unexpected allies. Vampires from Lucien's court, who had come to respect Olivia, stood witness to the union. Even Seraphine, who had been cold to Olivia at first, gave a speech about how the human had proven herself worthy of the king's affection. And when Lucien kissed his bride, sealing their vows, the entire court erupted in applause that echoed through the underground chambers. The years that followed were happy ones. Olivia worked with Lucien to establish new policies that protected Dompiers and other mixed heritage beings in vampire society. She became an unofficial ambassador between the human and vampire worlds, helping to negotiate treaties and alliances that benefited both. Nikolai continued to thrive, growing into a young boy who was beloved by both the northern court and the humans he encountered during rare surface visits. He was being prepared to one day take his father's throne, but Lucien made sure he also understood his human heritage, encouraging Olivia to teach him about mortal culture and values. But time, as it always does for mortals, began to take its toll on Olivia. She was 38 when she first noticed the gray hairs, 42 when the lines around her eyes became permanent, 45 when she started feeling the aches and pains that came with aging. Lucien noticed every change, she knew. Vampires missed nothing, but he never treated her any differently, never made her feel like she was becoming less beautiful or less valuable to him. If anything, he seemed to treasure her more with each passing year, as if trying to memorize every moment before time stole her away. It was Nikolai, now a young man of 14 who looked 18 due to his accelerated aging, who finally brought up the subject no one wanted to discuss. They were having dinner together, a ritual they'd maintained throughout the years, when Nikolai set down his fork and looked at his mother with serious silver eyes. "There's a way to stop you from aging," he said quietly. "We all know there is." Olivia's heart clenched. She knew what he was talking about. Lucien could turn her, make her vampire, grant her immortality. They'd never discussed it explicitly, but the possibility hung between them like a shadow. "Nikolai," Lucien said, his voice carrying a warning. "No, we need to talk about this." Nikolai looked between his parents. "I've been reading the old texts. Vampire-human marriages only work if the human is turned. Otherwise," he couldn't finish the sentence. "Otherwise I die and your father lives on alone." Olivia finished gently. I know, sweetheart. We know, then why haven't you done it? Nikolai's voice cracked with emotion. Why are you letting her grow old when you could save her? Because it is not my choice to make, Lucien said firmly. Becoming vampire means giving up sunlight forever. It means drinking blood to survive. It means watching the mortal world change while you remain frozen. I will not force that on Olivia, no matter how much I wish to keep her with me. But I want it, Nikolai said desperately. I want my mother to stay. I'm not ready to lose her. Tears streamed down Olivia's face as she reached across the table to take her son's hand. Oh baby, I'm not going anywhere for a long time yet. I'm only 45. I could have decades left. Decades aren't enough. I want centuries. I want you to see me grow up fully. To meet whoever I choose to spend my life with, to be there when I take the throne. Nikolai's grip on her hand was almost painful. Please, Mom, please don't leave us. Olivia looked at Lucien, saw the carefully controlled desperation in his crimson eyes. He'd never asked her to turn, never pressured her, but she could see how much he wanted it, how much the thought of losing her terrified him. Can I think about it? She asked quietly. It's a huge decision. I need time to consider what it would mean, of course. Lucien said immediately, take all the time you need. I will love you and support whatever choice you make. But Olivia could see the fear beneath his calm exterior, could see how much it cost him to offer her the freedom to choose her own mortality. She spent weeks wrestling with the decision. The advantages were obvious. She would get to stay with Lucien and Nikolai forever, would get to see their family continue to grow and thrive, would never have to say goodbye. But the costs were significant too. She would have to give up the sun, would have to drink blood, would have to watch as the human world she'd been born into became increasingly foreign. She would outlive every human she'd ever known, would see civilizations rise and fall, would become something other than what she'd been born to be. It was Nikolai who ultimately helped her decide. She found him in the library late one night, surrounded by books on Dhampir history. He looked up when she entered, and she could see the weight of worry on his young face. Can't sleep? She asked, settling beside him. I keep thinking about what happens if you choose to stay human, Nikolai admitted. I know it's selfish, but I don't want to lose you, Mom. You're the one who taught me how to be kind, how to care about both sides of my nature, how to bridge the gap between vampire and human. If you're gone, you'll be fine, Olivia assured him. You're already an amazing young man. You don't need me to. I'll always need you, Nikolai interrupted. Maybe not the way I did when I was a baby, but I'll still need my mother. And Dad needs you too, even if he's too noble to say it. You make him better, happier, more human in the best possible way. Olivia pulled her son into a hug, marveling at how tall he'd gotten. When did you get so wise? I learned from the best. Nikolai pulled back to look at her seriously. I know becoming vampire is scary, but you wouldn't be doing it alone. We'd be there with you every step of the way. And think of everything we could accomplish together. All the good we could do for both our peoples over centuries instead of just decades. He was right, Olivia realized. She'd spent 15 years working to bridge the gap between humans and vampires, establishing programs and policies that protected both. But what could she accomplish with centuries? How much more could she help if she had the time and the power? And more than that, she wanted to stay with her family. Wanted to see Nikolai take the throne someday. Wanted to grow old with Lucien, even if old meant something very different for vampires than for humans. She made her decision that night. Lucien was in his study, reviewing court documents when Olivia found him. He looked up immediately, setting aside his work as she approached. I want you to turn me, she said without preamble. I want to become vampire. I want to stay with you and Nikolai for as long as this world exists. Lucien was out of his chair in an instant, his hands framing her face. Are you certain? Olivia, once it is done, there is no going back. You will be vampire forever. You must be absolutely sure. I'm sure. I've thought about nothing else for weeks, and I keep coming back to the same conclusion. My place is here, with you, with our family. I don't want to leave. I don't want to miss a single moment of our lives together. You understand what the turning entails? The pain, the transformation, the new hungers you will have to control? I understand, and I trust you to guide me through it. Olivia took his hands in hers. I love you, Lucien. I want to spend eternity with you. Lucien's expression was a mix of joy and trepidation. When soon? Before I lose my nerve. Olivia managed a shaky smile. Is there anything I need to do to prepare? We should perform the turning ritual in the ceremonial chamber. It is warded, protected, designed specifically for this purpose. Lucien pulled her close, his voice dropping to a whisper. I will make it as painless as possible, and when you wake as vampire, I will be there. I promise. They set the date for 3 days later, giving Olivia time to say private goodbyes to her human life. She went to the surface one last time, stood in the sunlight and memorized the way it felt on her skin. She wrote letters to people from her old life, explaining her sudden disappearance in vague terms, and she spent time with Nikolai, who was both excited and nervous about his mother's transformation. "Will you be different?" he asked, the night before the turning. "Will you still be you?" "I'll still be me," Olivia assured him. "Just a vampire version of me. I'll still love you just as much. I'll still be your mother. Promise?" "I promise." The ceremony took place at midnight. The chamber was circular, with walls carved with protective runes that glowed softly in the darkness. Lucien had prepared everything with meticulous care: candles, ritual implements, and an ornate bed where Olivia would complete her transformation. Nikolai was there, along with Seraphine and a few other trusted court members. They would bear witness to the turning, ensuring it was done according to ancient law. Lucien led Olivia to the center of the chamber, his hands gentle as he helped her onto the bed. "Last chance," he whispered. "If you have any doubts." "I don't," Olivia said firmly. "I'm ready." Lucien nodded, then turned to address the witnesses. "I, Lucien Draconis, king of the Northern Vampire Court, claim Olivia Paxton as my eternal bride. I take her blood as my own, give her my blood in return, and bind her to me for all time. Bear witness to this turning and recognize her as vampire royalty when she rises." The formal words sent a shiver through Olivia. This was really happening. She was about to become something other than human, something she'd once thought only existed in stories. Lucien knelt beside the bed, his crimson eyes holding hers. "It will hurt," he said softly, "but I will be with you through all of it. Trust me." "Always," Olivia whispered. Lucien leaned down and kissed her, slow and tender. Then his lips moved to her throat, and she felt the sharp sting of his fangs piercing her skin. The pain was intense but not unbearable. Olivia gasped, her hands clutching at Lucien's shoulders as she felt her blood flowing out of her body and into him. The world started to dim, growing hazy and distant. Just when she thought she might pass out entirely, Lucien pulled back. He bit into his own wrist, and dark blood welled from the wound. "Drink," he commanded, pressing his wrist to her lips. Olivia hesitated for only a second before obeying. The taste was strange, metallic and sweet, and somehow right. She drank deeply, feeling Lucien's blood flowing into her, changing her on a fundamental level. Heat flooded her body, followed by cold, followed by agony so intense she couldn't even scream. Every cell was being rewritten, every part of her humanity burning away to make room for something new. She was dimly aware of Lucien holding her, murmuring reassurances. Aware of Nikolai nearby, his voice tight with worry. But mostly there was just the pain, the transformation, the sense of dying and being reborn in the same endless moment. And then finally everything went dark. When Olivia woke, the first thing she noticed was the silence. Not the absence of sound, but the presence of sounds she'd never been able to hear before. She could hear Lucien's unnecessary breathing beside her, could hear Nikolai's heartbeat from across the room, could hear conversations happening in chambers far away. The second thing she noticed was the smell. Everything had a scent now: the stone of the walls, the wax of the candles, the blood flowing through Nikolai's veins. She opened her eyes and gasped. The world was so much clearer than it had been before. She could see individual grains in the stone ceiling, could see the microscopic movements of air currents, could see in the darkness as clearly as she once had in daylight. "Olivia?" Lucien's voice, and she turned to find him leaning over her, his expression anxious. "Can you hear me? Do you know who I am?" "Of course I know who you are," Olivia said, then startled at the sound of her own voice. It was the same, but somehow more melodic, more resonant. "I'm not going to forget my own husband." Relief washed over Lucien's face. "How do you feel?" Olivia took stock of her body. Everything felt different, stronger, faster, more alive, despite technically being undead. She sat up with ease, marveling at how light she felt, how powerful. "I feel amazing," she said honestly. "Is it always like this?" The initial surge of power fades somewhat, but yes. "You are vampire now, my love, immortal, eternal." Lucien helped her to her feet, steadying her as she adjusted to her new strength. "And absolutely beautiful." Olivia caught sight of herself in a mirror across the room and gasped. Her skin had paled to that same porcelain white as all vampires, and her hair had lightened to a silvery blonde. Her eyes, when she looked closely, had shifted to a deep violet. "I look like you," she whispered. "Like I belong." "You have always belonged," Lucien said softly. "But now the world can see it." Nikolai approached cautiously, his silver eyes searching her face. "Mom, are you okay?" Olivia turned to her son and smiled, pulling him into a hug. "I'm perfect, sweetheart, better than perfect. I'm still me, just more." Nikolai hugged her back fiercely. "You scared me. You were unconscious for 2 days." 2 days? Olivia pulled back in shock. "The turning takes time," Lucien explained. "Your body needed to complete the transformation, but you came through beautifully. stronger than most new vampires I have seen. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of adjustment. Lucien taught Olivia how to control her new abilities, the speed, the strength, the enhanced senses. He taught her how to hunt, how to drink blood without killing, how to navigate vampire society as one of them rather than as an outsider. It was strange at first, giving up the sun and embracing the night. But Olivia found that she didn't miss her human life as much as she'd feared. She had everything she needed right here: her husband, her son, her purpose, and she had time. Centuries of time to make a difference, to build bridges between species, to watch their family grow. 5 years after her turning, Nikolai came of age and was formally recognized as heir to the northern throne. The southern court still grumbled, but their opposition had weakened considerably. Other Dampiers had come forward, inspired by Nikolai's example, and vampire society was slowly changing to accept them. 10 years after that, Lucien and Olivia presided over Nikolai's coronation as co-ruler of the northern court. Their son had grown into a wise, compassionate leader who commanded respect from both vampires and humans. And through it all, Lucien and Olivia's love only deepened. They were true partners in every sense, ruling together, working together, facing each new challenge side by side. One night, 50 years after Olivia's turning, they stood together on the same balcony where Lucien had first confessed his love. The underground city sprawled before them, more vibrant and diverse than ever. Humans and vampires and Dampiers walked the streets together now, thanks to the policies Olivia had spent decades implementing. "Do you ever regret it?" Lucien asked quietly. "Giving up your mortality?" Olivia looked up at her husband, at the face she'd loved for over half a century, and smiled. "Not for a single moment. This life, this family, this love, it's everything I ever wanted and more than I ever dreamed possible." Lucien pulled her close, kissing her with a passion that hadn't dimmed despite the decades. "I love you, Olivia Draconis. Thank you for choosing me, for choosing us, for taking a chance on a vampire king and his crying infant son. Best decision I ever made," Olivia said, laughing. "Though I have to admit, when I agreed to nurse that abandoned baby at midnight, I never imagined it would lead to this. Neither did I. I thought I would simply retrieve my son and return to my cold, solitary existence." Lucien's crimson eyes were warm as they gazed into hers. "Instead, I found a family, a purpose, a reason to believe in love again." They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the city they'd helped build. Nikolai was somewhere in the palace below, probably working late on some new initiative. Their family had grown to include trusted advisors, friends, allies, a whole network of people who believed in their vision of a world where different species could coexist. And they had forever to continue that work, forever to love each other, forever to build on the foundation they'd started with one crying baby and a compassionate human woman who refused to give up on him. It wasn't the life Olivia had planned, but it was the life she'd chosen, and she wouldn't change a single moment. As if reading her thoughts, Lucien pulled her closer and whispered, "Thank you for saying yes. That first night and every day since." "Thank you for asking," Olivia replied, resting her head against his chest. "Thank you for seeing me, for trusting me with your son, for loving me enough to let me make my own choice. Always," Lucien promised, "for all eternity." And in the peaceful darkness of their underground kingdom, surrounded by the family they'd built and the love they'd nurtured, Olivia Draconis knew that she had found exactly where she belonged. The story could have ended there, with the happy couple watching over their thriving kingdom. But life, even immortal, life always had more to offer. 20 years later, Nikolai came to his parents with news that surprised them both. "I've met someone," he said, his silver eyes bright with emotion. "A human woman. Her name is Zara, and she works at the hospital we established on the surface. She knows what I am, what we all are, and she's not afraid." Olivia and Lucien exchanged knowing looks. History, it seemed, had a way of repeating itself. "Tell us about her," Olivia said gently, taking her son's hand. As Nikolai described the woman, he'd fallen in love with a doctor dedicated to helping both humans and vampires. Someone who saw past species to the person beneath. Olivia felt her heart swell with joy and nostalgia. She remembered being that human woman, the one who dared to love beyond the boundaries of species. "Bring her here," Lucien said finally. "Let us meet this remarkable woman who has captured our son's heart." Zara proved to be everything Nikolai had described and more. She was brilliant, compassionate, and utterly fearless. She looked at the vampire court with wonder rather than fear, asked intelligent questions about their society, and treated everyone from the king and queen to the lowest servant with equal respect. And she loved Nikolai with a devotion that reminded Olivia of her own feelings for Lucien. "She wants to turn," Nikolai told his parents privately, after Zara had been visiting for several weeks. "She's seen what we have, what you and Dad have built together, and she wants to be part of it. to help bridge the gap between our peoples the way Mom did. It is her choice to make, Lucien said, though his eyes were on Olivia. But she must be certain. The turning is irreversible. She is certain, Nikolai insisted. We've talked about it extensively. She knows what it means, what she'd be giving up. And she's ready. Olivia pulled her son into a hug. Then we'll support you both, just like your father supported me. The turning ceremony for Zara was beautiful and moving. Watching her son perform the same ritual that had bound Olivia to Lucien brought tears to her eyes. And when Zara emerged 3 days later as a vampire, her eyes bright with new power and her hand clasped in Nikolai's, Olivia knew their family was complete. They celebrated Nikolai and Zara's wedding a year later, a grand affair that brought together representatives from all 5 vampire courts and prominent human leaders. It was a statement of unity, a demonstration that love could bridge even the deepest divides. And as Olivia danced with Lucien at the reception, watching their son and his new bride laughing together, she marveled at how far they'd all come. "We did it," she whispered to her husband. "We built something that will last. We built something that will change the world," Lucien agreed. "And it all started with you, my love, with your compassion for a crying, abandoned infant." Olivia smiled, remembering that midnight encounter that had changed her entire existence. She'd been so nervous, so uncertain, cradling that tiny baby and trying desperately to soothe his tears. She'd had no idea that the vampire king standing frozen in the doorway would become her husband, her partner, her eternal love. But she'd taken a chance. She'd chosen compassion over fear, love over safety, family over solitude. And in doing so, she'd found everything she'd ever needed. As the celebration continued around them, Olivia and Lucien slipped away to their private chambers. They stood together in the room where they'd first brought Nikolai home, where they'd learned to be parents together, where they'd built the foundation of their family. "Do you remember that first night?" Olivia asked. "When you walked in and saw me nursing Nikolai?" "I remember everything about that night," Lucien said, pulling her close. "I remember thinking I had never seen anything more beautiful or more unexpected. I remember feeling something shift inside me, something I thought had died centuries ago. I remember deciding in that moment that I would do whatever it took to keep you both in my life." "I was so scared of you," Olivia admitted. "You were this powerful, otherworldly being, and I was just a human nursery worker. I had no idea how to navigate your world. But you learned, you adapted, you thrived." Lucien cupped her face in his hands. "You became a queen in every sense of the word. You changed vampire society, opened our eyes to possibilities we'd never considered. You gave me a son and helped me learn to be a father. You gave me love when I thought I was beyond such things. You gave me a family," Olivia countered. "A purpose. A life beyond anything I'd imagined. You trusted me with your son when you had no reason to. You saw value in me when I was just a scared human woman trying to comfort a crying baby." They kissed then, slow and deep, a reaffirmation of everything they meant to each other. When they finally pulled apart, both were smiling. "What do you think the future holds?" Olivia asked. "We have centuries ahead of us. What will we do with all that time?" "We will continue the work we have started," Lucien said. "We will watch Nikolai and Zara rule, perhaps welcome grandchildren someday. We will fight for unity and understanding between all peoples. We will love each other with every day we are given." "Grandchildren," Olivia repeated, her eyes going wide. "I hadn't even thought about that possibility. Dampiers can reproduce, though it is rare. But if Nikolai and Zara are blessed with children," Lucien's expression softened. "We will be there for them just as we were there for him." Olivia laughed, imagining tiny babies with silver eyes and white hair, part vampire and part human and wholly loved. "We're going to need a bigger nursery. We have an entire palace at our disposal. I think we can manage." They stood together in comfortable silence, contemplating a future filled with endless possibilities. There would be challenges, certainly. The vampire and human worlds were still learning to coexist, and there would always be those who opposed change. But Olivia and Lucien had faced every obstacle together so far, and they would continue to do so for eternity. "I love you," Olivia said softly. "Thank you for walking into that nursery 70 years ago. Thank you for seeing me. Thank you for choosing me." "I love you," Lucien replied. "Thank you for nursing my crying son. Thank you for staying despite your fear. Thank you for becoming my wife, my partner, my eternal companion. Thank you for saying yes to forever." They kissed again, sealing the promise they'd made decades ago and would continue to honor for centuries to come. Outside their chambers, their kingdom thrived. Their son and his wife were building their own love story. The future stretched before them, bright with possibility. And it had all begun with a simple act of compassion, a human woman nursing an abandoned baby at midnight, and a vampire king who walked in and went still, his frozen heart remembering how to beat. That moment had changed everything, had built a family, had transformed a kingdom, had proven that love could transcend species, overcome fear, and create something beautiful from the most unexpected circumstances. As Olivia settled into Lucien's arms, she silently thanked whatever fate had brought her to that nursery on that particular midnight. She'd been working a graveyard shift, exhausted and lonely, with no idea that her entire life was about to transform. But she'd shown up. She'd cared. She'd refused to give up on a crying baby who needed her. And in return, she'd received everything: a family, a kingdom, a love that would literally last forever. Perfect didn't begin to describe it, but it was theirs, built on trust and compassion and the courage to choose love even when it seemed impossible. And as Olivia drifted off to sleep in her husband's arms, she knew with absolute certainty that she would make the same choices all over again, in every lifetime, in every universe. Because some loves were worth risking everything for. Some families were worth building against all odds. And some crying babies were worth nursing at midnight, even when you had no idea that the vampire king watching from the doorway would become your entire world. This was her forever. And it was beautiful.